Greetings, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We're live again with our second topic for 2021. Last year, November, we announced that several floor standers and select center speakers from our Polk Legend and DT Demand series were the first to receive IMAX Enhanced certification, and that list continues to grow. Today, we're going to discuss advancements in IMAX Enhanced and how this technology can deliver IMAX's signature picture, sound, and scale in the home. Now we have some new and some familiar special guests. Joining us today are Bruce Marco, Senior Vice President, Head of Post-Production at IMAX Corporation, Nate Brown, Product Manager at DTS Home Audio, and Glenn Stone, VP of Engineering and Systems Architecture at DTS Home Audio. Welcome to the webinar, gentlemen. Thank you very much for being with us and thank you for your time. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over now to our host and training guru, Phil Jones, who's joining us from his office in Carlsbad. Over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Frederick. Hello, everyone, and another exciting topic for you movie enthusiasts out there. And I have my two pals, Glenn and Nate, who have been here many times, and Bruce. Bruce, welcome to the madness. And we're here to talk about IMAX Enhanced. And Glenn and Nate were nice enough to pull strings to get Bruce to come, because if anybody knows about IMAX and what makes IMAX special and the process of developing IMAX content, it would be Bruce. So Bruce, can you do me a favor, and why don't you share with the audience kind of the history of IMAX? How did it get started, and things like that, and then we can just go from there. Just a little bit of a history of the brand.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Phil, and everyone for having me at the webinar. Let me give you a little history of IMAX so you understand where we came from and what and why we do certain things. Basically, IMAX is just a little over 50 years old. Our first presentation was in the World's Fair, actually, and there's a photo of it there in Osaka Pavilion. It was a pop-up IMAX, which is pretty cool looking, and we actually still do those today for special events, which is neat. We've built some pretty amazing pop-up IMAX theaters. Currently we have over 1,600 screens in 81 countries, possibly maybe even 82. So we like to say we're actually in more countries than Starbucks. So we're actually pretty big in that regard. Our screens are typically very, very large, much larger than the average cinema. Our average size is a 60-foot wide screen. They go up to about 110 feet, actually. We have different aspect ratios. Our kind of classic traditional IMAX theater has a 1:4:3, which is that square image screen, which is actually, I think, more what you're seeing here, I believe. And most of our theaters, however, are 1:9:0 aspect ratio, but in either case, those screens are wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling. So the idea is that these are all custom-built, purpose-built theaters that are designed by IMAX. And that's one of the things that a lot of people don't know, is that we have our own engineering department. We basically design our own projection technology and build it ourselves up in Toronto. We also design and engineer our audio systems in our theaters. And what's cool is that all of our theaters are basically designed, even when we're going in a multiplex where there's other theaters, our engineering team still designs that theater. They still determine the layout of the seats, the screen, and how it's the pitch, and where the audio is configured and how it's configured. So really the idea is that our theaters are extremely consistent worldwide. And that's something that our filmmakers really, really like, because that's one of the drawbacks to non-IMAX cinemas, is they're all very, very different. Non-IMAX uses all different projection technologies, different audio systems, different speakers, different amps, different acoustic treatments. Our theaters are all designed to look and sound the same and provide, the most immersive, engaging experience, both for picture and sound. As I mentioned, we build and design our own projectors. We are currently, our latest generation are laser projectors that go out to a full rec 2020 color, which I don't believe any other system does. They're 4K. Most of our systems are still the 2 projector systems. Our newest laser is a single projector system. But the other thing we do is our theaters every day are calibrated for both picture and sound. There's cameras in the back of the auditorium that shoot test patterns on a morning when they turn on the systems. They shoot test patterns on the screen. The cameras record. They make adjustments to the system. There's pink noise that's played. It can change both equalization and SPL levels in the theaters to ensure that they're at the proper both proper volume and reference volume. And if there are any issues technically, those are reported to our NOC centers. We have one in Toronto and one in China. So we're kind of a 24/7 operation since we are worldwide. And the NOC centers can remotely log into our theaters if there are any issues, if they get any flags. A lot of the things they can correct remotely. And if they can't, then they dispatch a technician to the theater to fix the issue. So again, what that means is we really kind of have the highest degree of an absolutely perfect playback for both picture and sound in all of our screens worldwide. And we charge more. IMAX is a premium ticket price, so people are paying more money to see it at IMAX, and so it's important that they get that best presentation and proper presentation they can. And that's really a thing that filmmakers like a lot about IMAX because of that consistency in the presentation, since they work amazingly hard, oftentimes for 2 years or more on a project, to make sure that what they're doing and what audiences are seeing is exactly what they've intended to be seen.
But let's talk first about the reputation of IMAX to the consumer, to the average person like me. I guess if you call me an average person, but I am a hardcore movie guy. And I have a theater, at home. But whenever I travel, I look for a theater that has a big IMAX theater in it. I look for the best one. I literally, when I travel, I research, because that's the only time I get to go watch movies where things get blown up, because I have little kids. So whenever I want to go see something like a Dunkirk or some big epic, Avengers Endgame with the at full volume with full impact, I got to do it when I'm traveling. So I always travel around. When I travel around, I find those IMAX theaters. Why? Because I have a theater. And if I went and watched it on those little, AMC 17s and the little itty bitty one, it's like, if I'm going to pay to go see a movie, I want it to be substantially bigger and badder than what I have at home. And when customers see that IMAX logo on the side of a building, it tells them that this has got a really good theater in it. And as a customer, you could walk into an AMC Prime or one of these places, and you could see it in Dolby Vision with Dolby Atmos. You could see it with DTS:X with a wide screen, or you could see it in IMAX. And all three of those experiences are completely different. And one thing I want to stress about our conversation today is, before, as a consumer, they only released one version of the movie, and that was all you got. And now, because of this partnership with IMAX and DTS to come up with IMAX Enhanced, now you have more options as a customer. We can argue about which one you like and all that stuff, but the thing is, you now have options. And I think as Bruce goes along and talks about the differences, and Glenn talks about the sound quality advantages at home, you will see that there's an advantage to having IMAX Enhanced. Now, the reason why these theaters can look and sound different is what we're going to talk about now, which is what Bruce was about to go into. Because this screen is gigantic, the type of cameras that they use are different. The sound systems are gigantic to go with a gigantic room to give you gigantic sound, and we're going to talk about that as well. So in order to give you this experience, from the beginning to the end, from the creation to the reproduction is different, and so that's what we're going to talk about now, Bruce. So you were just about to talk about the cameras that are required to generate a picture for a screen that big.
Yeah. And when IMAX started, we actually started making movies back in the day, and they were documentary films. But in order to really make something that was special for audiences, we also had to design and develop our own camera technology. So that was our IMAX 1570 millimeter film camera, which is still in use today by some of the biggest filmmakers in the world. Chris Nolan, uses it on virtually every movie he does now, including the most recent Tenet, where at least half the movie was shot with this film camera. And the new James Bond movie used it. There's over 40 minutes of footage shot with this IMAX film camera. And really, it gives you a stunning image on our bigger screens. Everything shot in IMAX film. At our post department that I run, we scan everything at 8K resolution. It's then finished in either 6K or 4K in most cases. And then, of course, projected in 4K. We actually still have some film projection theaters left. Tenet was projected on film in some screens around the world as well, but most, of course, are digital. And we've also, there was a need to do this because of the size of our screens. Our projectors are also brighter. We run at 22-foot Lamberts instead of the industry standard 14. We have higher contrast in our projection systems than other systems. So really, the image is put under, it's like a microscope. So we also developed our proprietary DMR technology, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But also for film cameras, we now have our Filmed in IMAX program, which we started last year. And the Filmed in IMAX program, we've certified 5 of the best digital cinema cameras in the market. And the reason we did this is because, now the digital cinema cameras have gotten so good that they all shoot in above 4K resolution, and they really, we wanted to first test them to ensure that we could use them in a way that could deliver stellar results on our biggest 110-foot screens. And we were able to do that. And really, we're able now to offer guidance to filmmakers about how to use these cameras. I mean, you could use the best digital camera in the world, but if you don't know what you're doing and you're not a very good DP, it's not going to look very good. So it's not so much about one camera is better than the other. They're all excellent cameras, but it's how you use them. And that's what our Filmed in IMAX program guide is about. And so movies that it's actually limited. Not all movies, just because you shoot with this camera does not mean you're filmed in IMAX. There is an actual program that the studio and the filmmakers agree to participate in. And there's a lot of things and requirements that they need to do when a movie is called Filmed in IMAX. So it's a combination of things in that regard. And one of those things is providing expanded aspect ratio. And that's exclusive to IMAX. And that's also something that some of our IMAX Enhanced releases now for the first time will feature that IMAX expanded aspect ratio when it exists on a picture. And again, it's important there. And the other thing is our sound systems, as Phil mentioned, are proprietary. We use a different audio format. It's a 5.0, 6.0, or 12.0 sound system. And the reason that was done was to create more dynamic range. All frequencies below 70 hertz in the theaters are rolled off into the subwoofers. So we do have a lot of subwoofers, and they're very powerful. And it's a point source sound system, basically, is what we call it. So the idea was it was designed to try and eliminate a sweet spot in the theater. The sweet spot is supposed to be the whole theater, is the idea. And to be able to get really good immersive imaging in the auditorium based on the way we've designed this. And if you've ever been in an IMAX theater, you can see on the right photo, we call those our Kanga speakers. Those are our biggest ones. But those are the left, center, and right. Those are also the high center channel, and those are the left and right rear surrounds. So the idea is that in a 5-channel or 6-channel room, all of those main speaker channels are exactly the same hardware and component. And in other non-IMAX theaters, you don't get that. The surround speakers are much smaller, much lower powered. In many cases, they are not full range or full frequency speakers. So ours are. So that creates a different environment in the auditorium. Our 12-channel system also has 4 additional independent height channels and 2 additional side surrounds. But even though those are smaller, those are still speakers that are designed by us, and they're extremely capable in terms of their ability to deliver at full, full dynamic range at a full power playback like a Chris Nolan movie without exploding. While movies are typically mixed first in Dolby, they are then converted into the IMAX sound format. The mixers who do the movies themselves are the ones that create the IMAX mix. And both the filmmakers, the DPs, directors, and audio mixers and sound supervisors come into IMAX and work with us to optimize that IMAX version of the movie for our screens. And that's a really, really important part of the process, where they work very closely with us. They do tests. The filmed in IMAX movies, one of the biggest things is testing and reviewing movies in IMAX before you shoot. They always shoot camera and lens tests, costume tests, different types of tests. And we want filmmakers to see those in IMAX so they can make an informed decision about what they're seeing. I mean, we had a big movie that thought they wanted to use a certain type of lens that was actually making the image a little softer. They wanted to use an old lens to give it a look. And they came and looked at an IMAX, and then they didn't like the way it looked, so they actually changed to a different lens to shoot the movie. So those are decisions that are made to really optimize for IMAX theaters. And we say, look, if you make it look better in IMAX, it looks better everywhere, so there's no downside to doing that. And here in this photo, we've had Zack Snyder came in about a month ago and looked at Justice League, the movie he did a few years ago. And he actually shot, even though no one's ever seen it, he shot that in the IMAX 1:3 aspect ratio, the entire movie. So he came in and was reviewing footage for the first time to see how it looked. And he was, like blown away and so excited to see it up in our format. And I know he's gone out and tweeted a lot of stuff about seeing it this way, and that's the way he intended it to be seen. So, that's a little bit about our audio and our picture format. And we still do make some documentaries every year and special things that are specifically just for IMAX theaters. But obviously most of our stuff we do is Hollywood releases. But we also do a lot of local language films now. We're doing movies in China. China's our biggest market. We actually have over 600 screens in China. And in China, our ticket prices are literally double the non-IMAX price. So we are truly a premium experience. Here in the U.S., we're usually about 20% more, than a normal cinema. But, we have people worldwide that what we call over-index, where, we can be on a very small percentage of the screens. And in the case of Nolan movies and movies that are really, optimized or filmed in IMAX, oftentimes we may only be on 2 or 3% of the screens, and we can gross, 12, 14, 15% of the box office. So it shows you that our brand, means something to consumers. They're willing to pay more money for it, to see it in IMAX, and especially when filmmakers shoot something and optimize it for IMAX, and they talk about that. Like the new Dune movie, actually, is one that has optimized footage for IMAX and shot with our digital program, and that's going to have a lot of expanded aspect ratio footage in it. And it's, that's exactly what we want as filmmakers to do more and more of that.
So the digital cameras now are getting better and better and better. It was the fact that if you wanted that type of resolution, you had to use the big film cameras. Now, can this film camera still beat up a little bit on that digital camera? Yes, but the digital cameras are getting better and better and better, and that's why IMAX has certified them. And if you think about it, the biggest movie lovers in the world are the people who make the movies. So that's why you see these guys like Peter Knowles, Zack Snyder, all of these guys that are totally into utilizing IMAX. Why? Because they really care. This is their life's work, and they want to give you the best experience possible. Now, I love the fact that he brought up Zack Snyder's this movie here, because remember, most of you have only seen the movie he brought up, Justice League, in the unless you went to an IMAX theater, in widescreen. So why don't you talk about aspect ratios and how we fix the top and bottom while I fix my internet?
No problem. Yes. Basically, when you see expanded aspect ratio in IMAX, whether it was shot in film or in digital, we don't crop the sides of the image to make the image taller. We're not doing that to get a bigger image. The filmmakers are actually capturing that larger image. They're using the full sensor on a digital camera. There's the new large format sensor cameras like the Sony Venice and the Arri LF that actually capture full sensor 150 aspect ratio, which is very close to 143. So we can finish that in a 143, which is, what they did in Dune. And there's the, on film, it also captures in 143. So we tell the filmmakers that if they're going to do expanded aspect ratio for IMAX, it's a common size format. So it's whether it's 240 190 or 143, the sides stay fixed. So it is actually more image, top and bottom, and that means the visual effects are finished more. You're seeing more stuff up and below, and yes, sometimes it's more sky and more ground. But what's interesting is that's the way we see. Then that's why we have an IMAX. That's why IMAX was developed with that 1:4:3 aspect ratio, because when we see, there are no borders, there is no frame. And while you may be looking at a specific object, there is more above and below, and that's what feels more immersive and more natural. And that's why our system was designed that way. And that's why these movies take on a different feeling when you see them, when they have expanded aspect ratio. And now, for the first time, you can kind of get that experience at home on these selected titles, because the neat thing is that televisions in your house or projectors, people are getting bigger and bigger sets. The average size continues to grow because the prices keep coming down. So you can actually start to get a more immersive opportunity in your home when you're watching. So again, what works for the theaters is starting to work for the home. And again, it's not every movie. There's a select number of movies that have this, but we are pushing to have more and more filmmakers create this for us, and more of them actually like doing it. I mean, Marvel has done it on most of all their recent movies over the last, probably five years or actually longer, all have exclusive expanded aspect ratio for IMAX, actually. So you only saw that if you went to see those movies in IMAX. Like the last two Avengers movies, where if you went in a non-IMAX theater, it was a 2:40 aspect ratio, but in IMAX, they were 190 for the entire movie. And again, they were shot that way. So you're seeing 26% more image than that was done by the filmmakers, not by IMAX.
I think that's one of the points of confusion, Bruce, and you've already mentioned it, but I'll touch on it again because it's important as it relates to IMAX Enhanced in the home. Is this notion of, people think that, okay, I saw it in the theater and it was really wide. Not in IMAX. I saw a traditional release. It was very wide. I see it on my 16:9 display. And are they cropping it? Are they cropping the sides of the image to fill my 16:9 display?
Right.
With IMAX, and in turn IMAX Enhanced, we're able to bring effectively that native full frame resolution into the home. And it just so happens that a 16:9 display is more akin to an IMAX aspect ratio than it is, of course, a traditional ultra widescreen theater. So
Right.
Bringing that image into the home, we're seeing more of what was originally shot, more of what the creative or the director intended. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the unique benefits. And I think everybody should understand that not every IMAX film that's released in IMAX Enhanced has the expanded aspect ratio throughout the entirety of the film. In fact, Spider-Man Far From Home, when that came out as an IMAX Enhanced release, there were 45 minutes of the expanded aspect ratio, and if you actually kind of keep your eye on it, it moves back and forth between the expanded aspect ratio and a more conventional widescreen aspect ratio. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, that is correct. And really, what we'll talk about in a minute also about it, really one of the biggest things is DMR technology. I mean, I can talk about it now. For IMAX Enhanced, I actually believe this is more important, and it's on every IMAX Enhanced title. And the reason DMR was developed in IMAX was because of our bigger screens, brighter image, more contrast screens, that you saw more film grain and you saw more digital sensor noise on that image. So IMAX had to develop this kind of noise reduction image enhancement technology to pull that noise level back down and film grain down to make that image look better on our giant screens. Now the exact same need for that technology is in the home. Because of 4K high dynamic range, the TVs have gotten bigger and bigger. They're extremely bright, as you know, and they also have unbelievable contrast, more contrast than movie theaters actually have. So the need for this noise reduction in DMR technology is actually more necessary than ever in the home format in 4K HDR. So every movie that's IMAX Enhanced runs through our DMR process. And it is controlled by the filmmakers. So we're not saying they have to remove all the film grain or noise, because that may be a creative look that they're after. But I can tell you, I've seen day in and day out when I go to work and I look at the mastering that we're doing, you can see that the version of the movie, when you look at it in 4K HDR, the grain or noise is way more than you would like. And I'm sure some of you have seen content on some of these big displays now, and you go, wow, this doesn't look so good. You're seeing that grain and noise. It didn't look like that before when you watched it in standard dynamic range, because those TVs and the older sets weren't able to reproduce that image like that. And now your sets are bigger. So it's really become, to me, an extremely important part of an IMAX Enhanced platform to have that better looking image quality for 4K HDR. And of course, the other really big thing here, of course, you guys are audio guys, is that we have partnered with DTS to utilize DTS-X to get the audio from both our theatrical mix and get the expanded dynamic range of the audio into the home for the first time as well.
So the DMR thing, actually, I kind of want to chime in on that because that's an important point. When I worked for Sony, I used to travel around with the big displays to different studios. I went to Marvel and Disney and Warner Brothers and all these guys with these big high res, with these big 4K displays. And what we kept showing them is, you like the artificial film grain on a Blu-ray. You like the artificial film grain on a VCR. Don't do it on a 4K TV, because that artificial film grain, because what happens is they were grading it on these small monitors for displays, maybe a 50-inch and Panasonic plasma, and they were like, add more film grain, add more film grain, add more artificial film grain until it looked good on their displays in their mastering rooms. And then somebody would take it home to a 75-inch 4K TV, and it looked like it was snowing. So the first thing was having to go to all the studios to convince them to, in their Blu-ray rooms, to actually have a really, 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 really bright, really, 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 really big 4K HDR
Right.
TV to make sure that you don't get carried away.
Yeah. And so that's exactly right. As a matter of fact, that's a requirement for IMAX Enhanced Mastering, is that when they master movies in Hollywood today, they're using typically they're using the Sony $30,000 monitor to do the color mastering on. It is a 32-inch size display. That's how big
X300.
it is. That's right. So it's very small, but it's unbelievable quality. But we say that you can do your color on that. But when it comes time to do the DMR and use the DMR technology to determine the amount of noise and grain reduction, you must use an IMAX Enhanced consumer display. They're typically using right now the Sony displays, and they have to be either 65-inch or larger in size. And so this way, they're setting that noise and grain level on exactly what the consumers are going to see at the highest level, and that is really, really important. And that is a requirement of our program, that they do that IMAX Enhanced Master, so they can. And I can tell you for a fact that how these displays, these consumer displays, we got one set next. You got the $3,000 display set right next to the $30,000 display. It's scary how close they look in quality. So it's pretty amazing. So that's the good news there, is these sets have gotten that good. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So there is a visual benefit in the studio, in the theater for IMAX. There's a visible benefit for the consumer in the home, whether it's seeing more because the aspect ratio is taller, seeing more because it's less film grain sometimes that the TV may actually enhance too much, so it looks better in your home. The other thing, like you were just getting ready to talk about, video without audio is just surveillance. So in order to have that full experience, you gotta have the sound to go with it. And we talked about the fact that IMAX has this gigantic, big, robust sound system where every channel has its own subwoofers. It's impactful. It sounds different. Well, now we have to take that system that's in this big theater and this big sound system and bring it to the home. And that is where DTS and DTS-X comes in. So real quick, Glenn or Nate, can you talk a little bit about DTS and the history, and then how this partnership formed with IMAX?
Yeah, Glenn, I'll take that, and I'll let you speak to the more technical details of the audio layouts and the system later. So DTS has been around since 1993. If anybody was of the same age as I am and made it out to the movie theater to see Jurassic Park, I genuinely remember very clearly the audio system in that theater and the experience that was so unique and so different from anything that we'd heard before. And what Spielberg did is he knew he had something special with that original Jurassic Park film, with visual effects that were just off the charts. And so he was looking for a companion audio technology that could deliver that same level of impact in a new way in theaters. And the good news is we were around and we had a technology, and so we were able to bring multi-channel surround sound digital audio to cinema for the first time, and it was awesome. And then the years that followed, we brought that into the home with DTS Digital Surround. I remember the U571 demo disc that I used to use with the depth charge scene. They're dropping depth charges. And it was so clear as day that our audio technology had so much more impact, had more depth, just had more oomph. And it was fantastic. And then over the years, we emerged as one of the leaders in the audio formats for Blu-ray with DTS HD Master Audio. And then, of course, today we have DTSX. And DTSX is just like IMAX. It's our pursuit of the most immersive viewing and listening experience possible. And so we support multi-channel with surround and height to create effectively a sphere of sound in your living room, or if you're Phil, in your custom theater in your home, right? And so DTSX is now available on 4K UHD Blu-ray disc, on Blu-ray disc, and also is coming to streaming platforms as well by way of this IMAX Enhanced program. And so it was mentioned very briefly, Bruce, I think you mentioned it, that these 4K displays in our homes have gotten to the point that they are just exceptional in quality with brightness and color and contrast, and now larger and larger sizes. And I'll speak for you, Bruce, that when you and your team saw the capabilities of these in-home systems, it was like, hey, now is an opportunity to bring the cinema experience into the home in some way. We actually have the capability in the home to recreate that experience in a way that is worthy of those four letters. It's worthy of the IMAX brand. And so IMAX and DTS got together and started talking about how we could translate that signature sound, that signature audio mix from the theater into the home by way of DTS bitstream technology. So that would be either DTS HD or DTSX. And what's really interesting, and this is where I might pass it to Glenn here in a moment, but what's really interesting is how similar an at-home DTSX or even Dolby Atmos or Oro 3D speaker setup, how similar that is to what we see in the IMAX cinema. There was that slide you had up earlier, Phil, that sort of showcased the point source layout of an IMAX cinema. And Glenn, if you wouldn't mind speaking briefly to how that translates into the home.
So what we're talking about here is, as you heard earlier in the discussion of different theaters and how they do audio, they tend to do what we call sort of phased arrays along the sides and stuff. Well, IMAX doesn't do that, and our homes don't do that either generally. So what we tend to have is big speakers in the corners of our houses and some in the tops, much like the layout you see here. And that's what we will call, Bruce calls it a point source mix. Sometimes you'll hear another term called far field mix, meaning the way the movie or the audio is mixed for the movie is you're in the center point, but the speakers are far away, as opposed to some sound stages. A lot of movies, they just put the speakers right in front when they mix it, and so you get a different sound, a different mix from that. So that's the cool advantage there. And then I think we'll point out at this time too, because I did see the DTSX Pro AVR lineup. You'll see on this picture, though, don't change it, there's a little speaker above a center channel speaker that's up high. Let's call that center height. That's important because in IMAX movies, you have the big screen, huge screen. And so in order to to sort of localize all the center channel effects, they actually have mixed two center channels. In the home, we do that. If you have an immersive setup, we will create an object to mimic that center height channel. If you don't have that, and if you have a DTSX Pro system, then that actually supports a real speaker, and it'll automatically then place the center channel into that speaker for you. So we do our best to bring that mix that's in the theater into your home.
Yes. So let's go back and talk about because the sound part actually, when we talk about home, is where it gets a little bit more. We need a little bit more detail. So let's go through and first talk about. You'll see that there's IMAX Enhanced Certified video displays, speakers, as well as AVRs. We're going to save the AVRs to the end because that's when we start talking about base management and switching and settings and everything else. But let's first talk about the different components. The first thing, of course, is the displays. So whether you're looking at a projector that's IMAX certified, I have a VW 915 up in my room for testing right now, and I also have a variety of Sony flat panels. Many of those are IMAX Enhanced certified. When you look at a display, the display is more about do no harm. Can you deliver it the way that Bruce made it? is the best way to think about the display. Can you deliver it without adding anything to it? So a lot of times when you look at a display, it switches off a lot of its video enhancements and things like that when you're playing back something in IMAX Enhanced. You don't have to use noise reduction if the movie has already had DMR done to it. So a lot of it is, can you achieve the right color? Can you are you showing all the detail without adding anything or removing anything? Is what they're looking for an IMAX Enhanced display. And Bruce, you mentioned that a lot of times you see that mastering display and in the room, in the grading room, and then you see an IMAX Enhanced certified display. And as you mentioned, they're close in appearance. They're not the same. If you've ever seen a $30,000 display, it ain't the same, but it gets a lot of it, a lot of the impression, correct?
Yeah, no, that's very true. And in our program, you know, for IMAX Enhanced, we do certified. These displays or TVs are certified, and they go through a rigorous testing and review process to ensure that they meet our standards. We are not, you know, IMAX Enhanced certification for devices is only really on the kind of the top tier devices, both audio and video, that meet this kind of best in class performance. We are not certifying, you know, the $200 TV like some other people are doing. So the idea is that the IMAX brand represents that highest level of quality bar and in theaters, and we feel that it needs to do the same thing in the home environment as well. So exactly. All of those products are at that level.
Exactly, and that's an important point. Is you want to have the peace of mind. They took the time to make this movie. You know, the director painstakingly shot it with the right cameras and the camera test, and then Bruce's team goes in and they master it to get exactly right. And think of having a IMAX Enhanced certified display as a peace of mind thing. You know that your display, it doesn't mean that a non-IMAX Enhanced certified display will not look great. It just means that you know that you have the peace of mind of knowing that this one will definitely work well. By the way, it doesn't matter. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's as close as you can get to what the filmmaker's intent was. And our displays, most of all the new ones are going to have an IMAX picture mode as well, that the audio triggers in the display. I know Glenn or Nate can talk a little bit more about that. But again, that puts that TV in its absolute best mode to reproduce exactly the way the director intended, which is really as close to that mastering session and master as possible.
Yeah, and by the way, even if you, and I know Nate's was going to want to point this out as well, even if you have an older TV that cannot achieve everything that's in an IMAX Enhanced piece of material, it will look better. That piece of content will look better on any display because all of the things they did to make it look good on an IMAX display will make it look good on any display. It's almost like if I get the most expensive tire in the world, it'll make a Lamborghini handle well. It'll also make your Volkswagen bus handle a little better. It won't handle as well as a Lamborghini, but it will still handle better. So better. So go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, I had my finger on the unmute button because I was about to say this. So when we think about IMAX Enhanced, we think about optimized and exclusive content, certified devices, and optimized playback. And that's really what we're talking about. So the content in and of itself, it's gone through the DMR process. It's got the expanded aspect ratio in many cases, which is, again, unique to IMAX and only until now seen and available in IMAX cinemas. And that content, to your point, Phil, it will look great on a non-IMAX enhanced system. Think of this as an additive ecosystem. And what we mean by that is the content by itself is outstanding. If you want to take it to the next level, get an IMAX Enhanced television. That IMAX Enhanced television, as Bruce mentioned, will have an optimized playback mode that effectively turns off all of the features in your television that might negatively impact the content that already looks so good. So it's optimizing the playback. It's a certified television, so we know it can produce the contrast, the color, and the clarity that's expected. And it's traditionally going to be 65 inches and larger. And then on top of that, you can say, hey, now I want the best audio experience I can get. So add an IMAX Enhanced audio device like an AVR or a processor. And again, there's an optimized playback mode that on those devices we call IMAX mode. And IMAX mode, again, manages, and we'll talk more about this later, I know, Phil, but it alters base management system and manages system settings to ensure an optimized presentation of that audio track. So all these components kind of work together and can be built over time, but it all starts with the content.
Exactly. Oh, while we're talking about the content, we just talked about the fact you have this great display. And so let's talk a little bit about content, because everybody goes, well, this is great, but you're talking about all of this IMAX Enhanced is great and wonderful, but the number one question that Glenn and those guys got every single time was, what about content? Because we've already talked about the process of it being shot and being mastered for the theater and then remastered for the home to be optimized. The next question is, Nate, where's the content? How do I get the content? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know I've said this before, but I think 2020 was the year of IMAX enhanced devices, audio devices, video devices, really becoming dominant in the market, and that took place. There are just an incredible number of IMAX enhanced devices that are now certified and available to purchase and put in your home. 2021, it's all about the content. So we started the year, if anybody saw the announcement from Sony Electronics has partnered with Sony Pictures Entertainment and is bringing their BRAVIA Core streaming service to 2021 BRAVIA XR televisions. So this could be an 8K LED, this could be an OLED display, whatever it might be. And BRAVIA Core is really unique. This is a game changer moment, and I'm not sure if people are really recognizing the gravity of that yet. BRAVIA Core is using their pure stream technology to stream movies at up to 80 megabit per second. That is, in some cases, 3, 4, 5 times better than some of their streaming competitors. In fact, it is on par, if not better, than 4K UHD Blu-ray discs. So historically, we've said that an optical disc still reigns king as the best way to see and experience the film that you want to watch. Sony's trying to change that game. BRAVIA Core is accomplishing some incredible feats with pure stream technology. I should mention, which I almost forgot to mention the other day when we were talking about this, that they do require at least 115 megabit per second internet connection. So it's not for the faint of heart. I know high bandwidth internet isn't readily available across the globe, But in areas where you have the bandwidth or the capability to get that bandwidth, turn it up a little bit. Maybe call your ISP and upgrade your service so that now you can get BRAVIA Core with all this goodness. So we're going to see hundreds of titles, IMAX Enhanced titles, coming to BRAVIA Core. They are all in, and again, you can get that on the new BRAVIA XR televisions. But it's not just BRAVIA Core.
Yeah, but let's talk about this BRAVIA Core thing, because like I said, I really want to pound on this because it is kind of important. Okay, the 80 megabits per second is big. Used to have to sacrifice performance for convenience. We all remember we all had MP3s because we had itty bitty hard drives and very slow internet. You know, dial-up, that kind of stuff, right? Now we can get CD quality or above CD quality audio from a variety of different streaming services, millions of songs in CD quality or better. So because our internet and our bandwidth have gotten bigger, you could carry tens of thousands of songs in CD quality in your phone. So the advancements meant that we could do more with these streaming services. A lot of Blu-rays can average around, even 4K Blu-rays average around 60 megabits per second. Why? Because there's only a fixed amount of data that can go on the disc. If the movie is 2.5 hours, I have to reduce the bandwidth to make it fit. Okay, if the movie is an hour or 90 minutes, I could use a little bit more bandwidth on that disc. Because this is streaming, it's like instead of you having a water bottle, you have a water hose. I can continue to feed as much as I can go, and I can maintain that for as long as necessary. So if I want to do the full Lord of the Rings back to back to back to back, you know, or they decide to make a one cut of all those movies together, I could still stream that at 80 megabits per second. Your internet provider won't be happy, but I can actually do it. It's also scalable. So if you can't do 80, the system will go down to what you can do. It can achieve a maximum. But there's other ways that movies are coming, right, Nate, besides BRAVIA Core, right?
Yeah, so there, there's some titles that are already available on 4K UHD Blu-ray disc. We've got a partnership with, you were already ahead of me, that's great, with Paramount. And Paramount is also going all in on IMAX Enhanced and bringing some outstanding sort of classic catalog titles back with IMAX Enhanced. Leveraging DMR for noise reduction and all of those things, but also new releases they're going to do in IMAX Enhanced. Some of these titles are already available on streaming services around the world, and others are coming throughout 2021. So again, I mentioned earlier, 2021 is where we're really going to see sort of the onslaught of IMAX Enhanced titles available, I would say predominantly in streaming formats, but also on 4K UHD Blu-ray disc. And then we touched on it earlier, but there is also a significant presence in China. And I think you said 600 IMAX cinemas in China now, Bruce. So there's the popularity and the demand. So we're bringing IMAX Enhanced home in China. And the first release was the 800, which is available now. And there are many more releases coming from a variety of studios in China coming in the first half of this year. So a whole lot of activity with regard to content.
So yeah, so that makes me excited because I'm looking forward to playing all these movies. And like I said, it's going to be a different experience because of the difference in aspect ratios, the difference in audio. So even if you've seen the movie, you may want to watch it again because the experience is going to be different. So before we get into the audio side at home, the speakers and the receivers, let's answer some questions about the IMAX, the company, DTS, the company, and video. So let's start with that first. Any audio stuff when they come, we'll get to that in the next portion of our section. So, Frederick, do we have?
We have, again, Kirsten is again on fire today. It's pretty much all him asking the questions here, but there's some very, very ones out there. First of all, very quickly, what digital cameras are certified for IMAX Enhanced? We mentioned a couple brands there.
Yeah, because he mentioned, I should have put the names on, Carson, I forgot, but Jen could type them in.
Yeah,
into the
Yeah,
chat.
you've got the Arri Alexa 65, which was actually the first one that we had done by itself a couple of years ago. Then there's the Arri LF and the Arri LF Mini, the Panavision DXL2, the Red Monstro, and the Sony Venice. Those are the ones that we have certified.
Exactly. So yeah, there's the Venice right there. I remember that camera. Woo. But and then there's the Arri Alexa, which I remember that camera. That's a very popular camera. The Reds, and things like that. Now so these are the cameras, and of course you still have your IMAX film cameras as
Correct.
well. So maybe Bruce could kind of email or text, email Jen those model numbers, because I know Carson wants those model numbers, because I know him, he likes to research, and we'll toss them in the chat area, Carson, with the actual model numbers. So if you could do that for Bruce,
Yeah,
Bruce,
and I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's the Red Ranger camera, not the Red Monstro.
Ranger.
They're very similar. The Red Ranger is the newer camera that's there. It's 8K, but it's developed a little bit more for professional cinema use in terms of its design. Same sensor as the Monstro, but it is the Red Ranger that we certified.
Okay, so yeah, so Bruce will type that in, Carson, and we'll give you those numbers. I know you're kind of curious, because I'm actually going to go look them up too when we get done with the video. So next question, Frederick.
Yeah, so his next question is about the format used in IMAX theaters. Do the sound systems in the IMAX theaters all use DTS-X?
Our theaters follow industry standard protocols. We make DCPs of all of our movies that are secure and compliant with the DCI initiative. And but our audio format is not encoded. It is a discrete 5.0 or 5 or 6.0 or 12.0. It is not any. There is no encoding going on. It is discrete audio on that DCP.
Exactly. So to let you know, those file sizes are gigantic. I remember seeing some people were sending me, when I used to do mastering of for retail, they would send me the DPX files, which were just frame by frame. It's each frame of the video, one frame at a time. Think of it like a whole bunch of photographs that you play really fast, and each frame was like 40 or 50 meg. So 3 minutes was like something stupid, like almost like several gig. So these DCP files are big, so of course even that type of delivery at home would be difficult, and that's where the mastery of companies like DTS comes in to give you that experience in a way that you could wrap it into your and send it and broadcast it or put it on a physical disk. So it's a discrete file, not really, think of it almost like a multi-channel above PCM. It's the best way to think about it. Okay. Next question.
So, okay, then related to this, the BRAVIA Core, does it use DTS HD Master Audio based DTS-X, or is it a different encoding?
Yeah, so it would use either DTS HD or DTS-X. Yeah, so it's one of those two audio formats, and that's going to depend on, honestly, timing of the release, but also just the discretion of the studio and the filmmaker. I've noticed, for example, that Christopher Nolan to date has released most of, if not all of his films on Blu-ray as 5.1 or 7.1 DTS HD Master Audio. That's it. He doesn't go immersive in these releases. So if you go, like I just picked up the 4K UHD Tenet about a week ago, and it's a DTS HD Master Audio track. So it's going to vary, but it's going to be either DTS HD or DTS-X.
Well, in that case, because the information that normally fits on a 4K Blu-ray often exceeds 80 megabits per second. So what's the compression method that's used on BRAVIA Core?
BRAVIA Core is a service. It's a streaming service. It's a whole package that Sony's releasing, and it's to their TVs. So they're using our audio encoding in DTS to encode the audio, just as Nate had said. Whether it's an immersive stream or not depends on the creator, how they want that. So they'll use our encoders, and then when it comes into the TV, it'll be decoded either at the TV or sent out over ARC or eARC and decoded by the AVR. So we will, for lack of a better term, we call that a DTS bit stream.
Yeah. Exactly. So the best way to think of this is if I have a physical Super Audio CD and I have a streaming service and they both have DSD, the file is the same. The delivery method is different. So, and that's all we're talking about is how do I get the ones and zeros from the source? I mean, how are the ones and zeros stored? Are they stored physically on a disk or are they sent to your house via your internet? It's still DSD Super Audio CD. It's just two different ways to deliver it. So it all comes down to what the director wanted to mix it in. If they say, I want to release this particular movie, Zombieland Double Tap in DTSX with master audio quality, that's what they can provide. It's about what they give the system. As you can see, because of the 80 megabits per second, there isn't really a conversation about bandwidth. It's bigger than the disk. So the limitation is not the streaming capabilities, it's the desire of the content creator. So we want to get that across, and that's going to vary. Not everything is going to be. It's all up to what they decide they want to do. But the benefit to you is you're going to get the best streaming portion that's ever been done, and it's probably going to exceed the disc that you probably have in your collection of that particular movie because you may have had it before it was an IMAX release. So, next question before we move on to the audio side of things.
Yeah, Carson again wants to know if there's going to be a theatrical IMAX version of the Snyder Cut of Justice League.
Ooh.
Sneaky preview.
That's a good question. I know that's something that Zack Snyder absolutely would like to do. We have not made any final arrangements yet, but we hope that something like that may be available. But there's not been a final decision by the studio yet on that and us. But I think it's certainly a possibility.
Yeah. Now, one thing that's kind of important that we should bring up is because of the current climate, which is why we're all in different places. Even Nate's not in his office; he's in his virtual office, right? The ability to accurately reproduce the director's or the creator's intent at home is becoming more and more critical. I have a slide in this presentation about Wonder Woman 1984. That was shot in IMAX. There's a lot of these movies that they're making the content, but right now, unfortunately, we all can't go to the theater and see it. So this gives you the opportunity to experience that stuff in your home. The release on HBO Max of Wonder Woman was not in IMAX, but it was shot. A lot of it was shot in IMAX. So if they decide they want to release this later in the IMAX release, you could have the opportunity now to have more of that experience in your home. Before, guess what? Because of COVID, it was shot in IMAX, and if it didn't hit the theater, it was going to go in a vault somewhere, and there was a good chance you weren't going to get that experience. And these faster internet services, a lot more direct release to consumer, along with release to theater, means that you're going to have access to stuff that, because of the way things have changed, we may not have. So that's an important point. I always joke, if you take a family of 4 to a movie theater, by the time you get the tickets, buy the popcorn, and buy each kid a hot dog and a couple of sodas, a family of 4, it can cost you $125 to go to a theater. If you went to maybe 2 movies or 1 movie a month each year, that's thousands of dollars. Buy yourself a sound system or start with one. For what you paid for that, you can get a nice AVR, a pair of mains, and a subwoofer. And I guarantee it's going to make all of your experience better. Next year, take the money that you missed because you couldn't go to, add your center channel and your rear surrounds. And that's going to make all of your movies better, all of your broadcasts better, all of your sports better. So right now we can't go. So take those funds, start investing and upgrading your system so you can utilize it more and more and more.
I always tell people sound is your most bang for your buck upgrade. That's, in terms of experience in the home. It does make the biggest difference. And sound mixing today is so state of the art and so fantastic. Sound designers, the way they do mix, and actually even for original content for the home, it's getting better and better. It's more immersive. So really the quality of of audio, both in theaters and in homes, is really over the last few years just continues to be elevated because of improved technologies and Pro Tools, and just the quality of the sound designing teams and all that. So it's really, if you've got a good sound system, some of the stuff is just phenomenal sounding, and obviously you can't really hear that if you're listening to it on the little speakers on your TV. So
Exactly. So we talked about the video aspect of IMAX Enhanced Certified, and that is basically do no harm. Show it the way that it needs to be shown. When we talk about IMAX Enhanced speakers, IMAX Enhanced can sound good on any speaker. I have a pair of Wilson Watt puppies. It sounds great, right? I have you have a pair of Polks or a pair of pick your brand Bowers. It's gonna sound great. When we talk about, but when it comes to IMAX Enhanced speakers, it's more like it goes back to that peace of mind thing. Do you have the dynamics, because we're trying to recreate this big experience, this what do you call it, far field, bass and all, big bass, over the top, big immersive experience. Can you do that at home? And when you see an IMAX Enhanced speaker, it's just knowing that it can handle what's being thrown at it. It can have the output, it's gonna deliver the bass, it's gonna have the clarity to meet the demands. So we have at Sound United several IMAX Enhanced definitive speakers. I know that you guys are testing right now the BP towers. Is that right, Glenn?
Yep.
And these are what you actually utilize in a lot of the demos that they've done for IMAX Enhanced when you guys travel around. Because I've been to one of Glenn's demos,
Yeah,
and it's been
we have
pretty
those,
shocking.
and subwoofers.
Exactly.
Not shown.
Now, and if you think
But
about
these
this,
have subwoofers in them too.
exactly. So Bruce had talked about that if you go to an IMAX theater, each channel has their own, built-in bass. So if in Dunkirk he wants an explosion to come from the back, at an IMAX theater, he knows that I can have the bass come from the left rear channel. I don't have to mix all of it into an LFE. What is an LFE? There is no LFE in IMAX, in an IMAX theater, because it's a 7.0.5. So the benefit of having something like this is just the receiver will do bass management and reroute the bass to your subwoofers in a home. That's one of the benefits of IMAX Enhanced and the receivers. But if you decide that you want more of that impact in those rear channels, this is a great way to go. I mean, even the center channel that they make for BP towers have a powered subwoofer in them. So I'm sure, if you're looking for an IMAX Enhanced experience, is really, really great. The ability to add height modules to these things. So if you cannot put the speakers in the ceiling, it's a lot easier to seamlessly add a height surround. And like I said, if you could afford to we've done this. I think Glenn has done this lots of times, and I've done this lots of times. If you could put BP towers all the way around and add LFE to an IMAX Enhanced system, it is ridiculous. So
Yeah, and we didn't make this point too clear, I don't think, in the last webinar, and so I think it's very important, and I think we're going to get into it, but I notice we're moving along on time here pretty quick. So the IMAX mix, when it comes into the home, we had to make a decision on, what's the high-end typical consumer going to be, and typically we assume then that they're going to have separate subwoofers. It's important to understand that in the Denon and Marantz AVRs, if you do go with those tower speakers with subwoofers built in, you can override that setting so the IMAX mix will go to those speakers and utilize those subwoofers. And that's an important thing to understand. So and that that's the ultimate. If you can send the bass like IMAX does in the theater to every speaker around the room, you've got top notch.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a few minutes about how you could actually do that. But we have a variety of different speakers. We have our BP towers. We have our Demand series have been announced to be IMAX Enhanced Certified. And like I said, it's just it's a peace of mind thing. Can you deliver clean sound, controlled bass, and great dynamics, and wide sound staging, all the stuff to give you that ability. If you have a great speaker, like a Bowers, you're going to get that too. It just has not been tested yet. That's the best way to think of it. So you want to have a high quality speaker. And the nice thing about knowing that it's IMAX Enhanced Certified is that IMAX and DTS tested it and said, okay, this can handle, and this is going to give you a very good experience and when you're watching it. And that also applies to our Polk Legend systems as well. These are also IMAX Enhanced Certified. And same thing, great highs, wide, great dispersion, great dynamics, and good bass. Different approaches by different companies, but the need to do those things are critical to reproduce the soundtrack properly. And it's just the fact that it has been tested. These even also have the height module. So if you cannot put the speaker in the ceiling, you can seamlessly integrate the height effects into the speakers. So that's the best way, because the speaker thing is pretty straightforward, just like the TV. TV is do no harm. Speakers is, can you deliver it without effectively with all the dynamics and all the bass, and all the detail. And if that's the case, you're certified. When we get into the receivers is when things get a little bit more complex. DTS:X is the base layer for IMAX Enhanced. That's the best way to think of it. You're trying to take this discrete 12.0 or 6.0 or 5.0 and make it work, utilize a traditional theater system. So for example, the 12.0 doesn't have there's no 0.0, there's no other feet, because all the channels are full range. Think of it as 7.0.5. Well, how do I translate that into a normal home environment? Well, now I can do a 7.1.4 with the center front height that Glenn was talking about, utilizing DTS:X Pro. So it's, how do I take this and translate it utilizing the type of speakers that are in a normal home? And a big part of this has to do with bass management. So Glenn, can you talk a little bit about the need for bass management?
Yeah, so as we've sort of covered in the theater, each speaker gets full range bass, full range audio. That's not typical in a home scenario. There's subwoofers. So and then because you have subwoofers, you're talking about crossovers. And so, typically when you talk about subwoofers, you tend to think of the low frequency effects channel, meaning, they purposely put stuff there. Well, we have to remix that because, IMAX mixers put stuff in all the speakers. So that's what they do at the head end, is they do a mix that we can then decode when we see the IMAX flag to invoke the bass management to try to reproduce best as possible the IMAX effect that you get in the theater at home, utilizing subwoofers. And that's why I made that little point earlier. If you actually have speakers that have subwoofers all around, you can then override that default setting in the AVR to tell it that you have those subwoofers. But if you don't, which is like, mass consumers, even mass high-end consumers, they'll typically have multiple subwoofers, then that's how this mix is tailored for. And the bass management will kick in, do some high pass and low pass. It uses actually some special ways of doing the filtering to ensure that you get the right content at the right levels, down to the subwoofers.
Exactly. So as Glenn was saying, if you buy a piece of IMAX Enhanced content, there's also another track on there. Remember, we're talking about the two, we have more than one option. It's kind of a DTS:X track as well. Basically, there's two ways I can listen to it. With IMAX Enhanced processing applied in the AVR, or with it not applied. If I'm playing that disc, there's a flag in the content that tells the receiver, I am IMAX Enhanced and my mix is different. And the receiver will automatically switch its parameters, bass management, everything, to give you that effect. It does it automatically behind the curtains. So all you do as a consumer is you go in and you set up your system the normal way that you do it. On a Marantz or Denon, you run Odyssey, okay? It gets all your channels right, your timing right, everything. So it sounds great whether you're watching Dolby Pro Logic, Dolby Digital, DTS, DTSX, DTX Pro. The second that flag triggers the receiver, it will change its parameters specifically for that content. A little later, I'm going to show you the menus. These menus don't even show up in the receiver's on-screen menu as an option for you to mess with unless you're playing the content. Because if you're not playing the content, you don't need to make these adjustments. So they only show up when you do when you make those adjustments. We're going to give you this handout, and this handout is going to talk about adjusting the bass management, whether you have large speakers and subwoofers. I mean full range speakers and subwoofers. Traditional IMAX enhanced default, or whether you have full range speakers but no subwoofers. What's the best way to set it up? And we give you that opportunity. You have the ability to either tell the receiver to automatically switch to the IMAX parameters, or just play back everything in DTSX and do not switch. That is a solution that you can have. It's funny, I can make a receiver that levitates and speaks with the voice of God, and people always say, can I turn it off? So yes, we gave you the option of turning it on and turning it off. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The other thing, Glenn, that we want to talk about is, because of the DTSX Pro, we now have different speakers that that we could talk about. Because you had mentioned, can you talk a little bit about that center height? That, because that's new for a home theater system with the, when it comes to DTS.
Sure. I mean, the reason center height is important is the IMAX mix can have a center height. As you saw in the theaters, there's a center height. Now, a lot of the typical homes using a DTSX or Dolby Atmos setup won't have this center height channel. And so today, if in one of those systems, we create an object using the height left and right in the center below to elevate and give you a center height channel. But if you can have a real speaker, that's even better. And with DTSX Pro, we support now more than 11 speakers. And therefore, you can actually configure the AVR to tell it you have a center height channel. And that DTS IMAX mix will then utilize that as a real speaker instead of creating the object for it. And so then you're getting as pure it can get when getting back to the IMAX replication.
Exactly. And also, if you have the Neural X turned on, which is their up mixer in for DTS and DTSX, you can also generate what's called a top surround, or as RL3D calls, voice of God. So when things fly over, they physically fly over. If there's a helicopter above your head, the helicopter hovers literally from the speaker above your head. So now I would love to spend a bunch of time talking about how DTSX and DTSX Pro is an object-based surround sound format versus channel based, but we don't have, but that's a 90-minute conversation. I encourage you to check out our conversation with Nate and Glenn on our Sound United YouTube channel about immersive audio formats. And we go, actually DTSX, we do a whole session just on DTSX and how it's mixed and the difference between channel based and object based. But because it's object based, like he said, they could physically, even if you do not have a center channel, I can make a center channel object where that speaker would be, where that speaker would normally be. But now you have the capability of adding that particular speaker, which is a really, really cool thing.
I just wanted to add, because you've mentioned it a couple of times, and I've been reading Karsten's questions and stuff. And so we should note, for example, Christopher Nolan likes horizontals. So the audio comes in an IMAX mix, it'll be, all to your horizontal plane. We allow the users to configure, if they like things like Neural X, which means they could actually get an immersive effect from that. Now that might make Christopher Nolan cringe, but a lot of people will do that, and that's not precluded from using, say Neural X to upmix a 5.1 mix to utilize those height speakers if you put them in.
Exactly, and that's the thing. You can even take an older track and utilize Neural X to give you a very, very immersive experience. So basically, if all that information is in there in the DTX content, it just takes the objects that have been provided and the channels that have been provided and utilize all the speakers. DTSX Pro can right now we have receivers that can do up to 13 channels, but the format supports up to 30. So if you're crazy enough to put 30 speakers or 30 different locations in your house, you can actually do, when that comes out, one day there's probably a maniac like Kirsten that wants to do that in his house. But yeah, but even if it's not, say it's a non-DTS piece, like a piece of PCM or an older piece of DTS content, the Neural X upmixer can take that, a Jurassic Park or an older movie. We were just talking about U571. I'm probably going to go get that movie right now because you just brought that up, because that was one of my favorite demos of all time, and I'm going to see what happens when I run it with the Neural X processor running, because I bet you it's probably going to be pretty freaking spectacular with water leaking from above me and things like that. So
I do want to mention, just for anybody who might wonder, DTS Neural X is a feature, it's a component of our DTSX decoder solution. So fear not, if you have an AVR or a processor that has DTSX, you also have Neural X. It's just a matter of finding the button to turn it on. And to Phil's point, you can take anything from a stereo MP3 to an old DTS digital surround 5.1 audio track, and you can upmix that to all the speakers you have connected to your audio system. And if you're running DTSX Pro, even greater capabilities with on a Denon or Marantz product up to 13.2, and eventually we could get up to all the way to 30.2 if we wanted to.
Exactly. So it's a really, really cool effect. So we'll talk a little bit more. We'll experiment. We'll talk in more detail. I know there's people that are going to want to hang out a little bit later to talk more about it. But like I said, because of on our flagship receivers, we have up to 13 channels of processing. You could do a variety of different combinations, from 7.1.6 to traditional, with the 7 speakers around the horizon and the 6 above you. With the 0.1, you could do the 7 around you with the traditional front heights, rear heights, and then have a center front height, oh my God, and a top surround. and then you could, but basically think of it this way. You can use, there's a million different combinations you could come up with that fits your application. That's the best way to go. And then a little later, there's a whole session. If you go explore our DTSX session, we talk about all of these different combinations and the advantages of all these different combinations. Now, the one thing that I do want to cover is the heights. Everybody's panicked about the heights. You can do a lot of different things for your heights. You could use physical in ceilings. You could use on walls. You can use a height enabled speaker to give you that height effect. The height enabled speaker basically ricochets sounds off of the ceiling. There's also virtual modes. So if you do not have any of these things and you want to still get a more immersive experience, another part of DTS X or DTS is the DTS Virtual X, I believe is the name for that, I believe. And that will also give you the more of that effect. So you can always get a better experience from this DTS X Pro material or DTS X material or IMAX material by utilizing of 3 different varieties. So regardless of what you're using, it's going to sound, it's going to be an improvement in sound. The base management is the last thing we want to talk about. And this is an important point that I want to get across. There's going to be some settings, like I mentioned before, that are built into the receiver. But those settings are not visible unless you're running a piece of IMAX content. When you run a piece of IMAX content, additional capabilities will appear to ask you how do you want to utilize the content. For example, when you're running regular non-IMAX material, you'll see that it says DTSX on the on-screen menu. If I'm running a piece of IMAX Enhanced material and I hit the surround options, it literally says IMAX to tell you that that content has that capability. You can go in And once that flag is detected under the audio parameters of the receiver, a whole bunch of other menus pop up that are not available when you are watching regular non-IMAX content. So if you're playing Dolby Digital, or you're playing Atmos or linear PCM, or even just standard DTS, you're not going to see some of these menu systems. And these menu systems are for what, as Glenn mentioned, in case you want have a bigger sound system. All of the instructions are in the handout. We'll talk a little bit after doing the Q&A, and maybe I'll even go into the receiver and show it to you. But there's a couple of things that it's going to know. You can go in and it's going to ask you if you have a pair of BP towers and no subwoofer. People go, well, what if IMAX Enhanced has bass management? It's supposed to send everything to the subwoofers. What if I bought a pair of BP towers that have 1,000-watt, these huge subwoofers built into them? How do I set it up? And you can go in and tell the receiver that you don't have subs, your speakers are full range, and you can tell it where you want to send the bass. There is a default crossover, high pass, low pass, that is part of IMAX Enhanced. And for most of you, leave it alone. Okay, we've done a million of these demos on some of the baddest systems using the default IMAX Enhanced settings. All right, because people think their speakers are full range. They really are not. I tell you, a lot of times it's because your speaker is big does not mean that your speaker is full range. The quickest way to do that, go to Tidal or Spotify and get yourself a 30 or 20 hertz test tone and see if you hear anything from your speakers. Most likely, they may be gigantic and you don't hear anything. So big does not mean full range. Large does not mean full range. So for a lot of times, you're better off leaving it in the default settings. If you do truly have a pair of full range speakers with powered subwoofers or something in them, then maybe you want to start playing, go into manual and make adjustments to the low pass and the high pass filters. But for many of you, I really strongly recommend you leave it in the default settings. So if I go into manual, first I'm playing a piece of DTS material. This other menu system down here will appear. If I switch it to manual, now I get the ability to say, where I want the my main speakers to stop playing. How low do I want them to play? So high pass means play down to 40. Low pass means bass system start at 70. Okay. And then subwoofer on means, do I have a subwoofer or not? And if I don't have a subwoofer, send the bass to my mains. So that is something that we added later because we realized that there are some people who need to customize the system for their particular situation. Did I cover that right, Glenn? I just want to make sure that I covered those points correctly.
Yeah, I mean, my summary is, you do what you said. You go through the basic setup with the AVR, set your speakers to what you think they are. Large generally means full range. IMAX Mix likes full range speakers, but if you set them to small, then we'll when you set them to small, then it overrides and you can set your crossovers a little differently because if you have small speakers. Run the Odyssey, of course, after you make the initial settings, and then listen to it.
Okay.
And again, if you use subwoofers, I always got to say, try to use more than one subwoofer. One of the cool things about IMAX is that bass reproduction in the theater is so smooth and immersive in the bass sense everywhere. And the way you can get that at home or try to get that is by using more than one subwoofer for all the acoustic effects that we've talked about in previous webinars when it comes to bass management.
Yeah, we talked a lot about setting up subwoofers, and we have a 90-minute session on it. And the summary is two subs are better than one because you get a better even bass experience. I will also tell you, you may want to set your speakers to large. Odyssey may break your heart because Odyssey does not care how tall your speaker is. It cares about, can your speaker reproduce what is considered full range in your listening environment at where the microphone is placed. So it will decide whether your speaker is large or small. You can override it, and because darn it, I bought a big speaker and my speaker is full range, but Odyssey is going to give you an honest opinion and it may break your heart. The other thing about Odyssey is it's going to go in and adjust all of your levels. And you'll see some speakers, you'll get plus levels. Some speakers, you'll get minus levels. So say, for example, if I got a speaker that's not very efficient, it may have to boost it. But if I get some horn-loaded, big bad boy, it may actually attenuate. You may see minus adjustments. The goal is to get everything to set a reference level. So everything hits your all of the sound is at the same volume from all the speakers, as if they seem like they're all equal distant from each other. So even if you're closer to your mains than you are to your rears, the system will add delays to ensure that everything reaches you at the same time. It sets a reference. Then you know that if I take my receiver and I turn my receiver's volume, we have that 0. If you have it set from minus dB to plus dB, if I set it to 0, it's playing back at reference level. For you people that have the 0 to 79 setting, actually 0 to 98 setting. I think someone mentioned that if I turn it to 80 on that type of scale, that's reference level. Most of us never play it that way, but you know that if I play it at 0 reference level, that the speakers can handle it and you're getting it at the proper volume and the proper amount of bass and everything else. So Odyssey will determine your size, your distance, and everything else. You could tweak on it, but when you're tweaking on it, it's more of a preference versus reference. We're going to take some more questions at the end, but we are right at our 90-minute time frame. So I would like to thank everybody for coming. And Bruce for staying up late on Wednesday and coming in this morning to talk to us. And of course, my partners in crime, Nate and Glenn, for showing up for every time I ask them to show up for one of these types of sessions, because I love having my partners from other industries and other businesses come and talk with us. I'd like to thank the guys that I'm sure Frederick and Eric and Jen have been frantically answering questions, which we will go through and answer some more in a minute. But I want to thank them for their assistance for planning and making sure everything has went smoothly. So for those who have to leave, take care, and we will talk to you soon. For those that would like to stay, I am sure that Frederick has a ton of questions from people that we could actually cover. So Frederick, fire away,
Yes.
young man.
The bulk of the questions have actually been explained. There's two that are standing out right now. There's a question from Daniel Anderson. Is anyone pushing for DTS:X support for pass-through and eARC on consumer TVs? Because at the moment, most only support pass-through of Dolby Atmos formats.
Yes, short answer is yes. That's a work in progress. When it comes to IMAX enhanced content, in that particular case, you don't have to worry, provided your display is an IMAX enhanced display. So we're not going to see that type of issue with IMAX enhanced content. And the bigger question of, are we working toward improving support for DTS:X bitstream pass-through over eARC on televisions? Yes, we are working on that.
Yes, and like I said, there's some more announcements that I know that Bruce and Nate and those guys are itching to announce, but they can't announce it right now when it comes to content. And like I said, we talked a lot about the Sony sets, but there's other sets out there by other manufacturers that are IMAX certified. You're going to find other speakers that are IMAX certified. There are other receivers that have IMAX enhanced. We pride ourselves at Sound United to being the first when it comes to the audio side of it, and all I can speak to is our stuff. But there are going to be lots of other devices that are coming, and we just talked briefly about Core. but there's other places where you'll start to see IMAX Enhanced content. And the second it's an IMAX Enhanced, it's in DTSX or DTS. So that just shows that you're and that's coming from the display, by the way. So eARC, eARC on the displays, it's all about the distribution more than the capabilities of the displays. So that's the best way that I can.
The other comment there is, if you're buying a TV today and you want to know if DTSX is going to pass through on ARC or eARC, just look to see that the TV says it supports DTS. I think that's the important. If it if the TV includes DTS, then it will pass through. So some of these questions are probably on some of the TVs that might not have a DTS support in them, and that's why it's not passing through. There was a question about OLEDs that I kind of answered in the chat session, but we could talk about it a little bit more if they wanted. The question is IMAX Enhanced content better on LCD, LED TVs or OLED TVs? Phil, you and I are both ISF certified, and we're trained when a consumer asks us a question like that to actually ask questions back to them. What's your viewing environment? Do you have a dark room or a light room? Where do you sit? Do you sit on the edge of a couch or in the middle of a couch? The reason we'll ask a lot of these different questions is these two different technologies of TVs have different strengths. OLEDs have a wider viewing angle, but they like darker rooms if you're going to appreciate the blacks, because they go beautifully black. But if your room has too many lights in it, you're not really going to appreciate that black. LCDs typically can go brighter, and then there's different panel technologies in LCDs that will even go brighter, but you have to be sitting right in front of them. And if you go off to the side, you'll see a color shift and things like that.
Exactly. And then we talk about color volume and all that stuff. So
well, they're all. I'm noticing now that they're all getting very good at color volume. All of them are, right up there now. At least the IMAX Enhanced Certified ones are almost, full DCI P3, which is cool. So it depends on your room size, and you'll see that LCD TVs tend to be larger. So if you want an 80-inch or something like that at at certain price points, or then you move into the video projectors. My point is, though, we do certify on both, meaning we check that they can reach those color spaces, that they are doing a D65 white point, that they that they meet certain brightness and black limits, so you get a good contrast ratio. I think that's one of the important things to take away from either technology is, with HDR, what you want to be able to get is that good contrast ratio, because you're going to have that high dynamic range of lighting conditions.
Exactly. And if you talk to different people, even if, like, I am an LCD guy, do or die. I love like Sony Master Series LCDs. I just think that when I look at them next to a mastering monitor, they look closer. But I can fight with guys back and forth, to Chris Deerings, and I'm sure Glenn has an opinion. I'm sure Johan has an opinion. It's what you like. Both of them, like I said, have strengths and weaknesses, but that you're still going to get an accurate representation of IMAX Enhanced content on an IMAX Enhanced certified display. Or if you have a great 2-year-old TV, OLED or LCD, that maybe was not IMAX Enhanced certified, if it's a good TV, it's still going to give you, like we said, a good representation and an improved picture, because you're feeding it a better piece of content. So
turn off any noise reduction and motion interpolation. It would be two of my hints to make your older model TV work. And
turn off.
Phil, you raise a good point. LCDs have come a long way. They used to have poor black performance. Now they're doing better. I'm an OLED guy, but I'm stuck at 65-inch. So if I want to go bigger, I'll have to probably go LCD just from the cost metrics. So those are the trade-offs that the consumer has to deal with.
And we can go, and it's so funny. I used to have those debates in my old job, because I used to always say, there's no such thing as perfect black in a movie theater. An LCD can normally match or exceed the black levels of any theater. So if you're trying to make it look like a theater, absolute black is not what the theater guy is striving for. He's more about color accuracy, shadow detail, and those types of things. So, but blacks are mesmerizing. It's like bass. I can't tell you that you don't want that kind of bass, just like I can't tell you don't want that kind of black. But so it's almost like it's a personal preference. Someone said, what's the difference between DTS and a Dolby Bitstream for eARC?
Before you start, unfortunately I do have to jump off the call, so I'm sure if you can keep going and do more stuff. Thank you for inviting me. I hope everybody got something out of this, and hope to do more in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce. He's got work to do. Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah. Well, what? We don't got work to do?
He's got to go make the movie you're going to see in a couple of weeks, so he's going to go.
Exactly.
The point of, you're going to take this?
Yeah, sure. I'll take it, and anything I miss, chime in. So there is a difference when it comes to how Dolby manages their audio bit streams over ARC and eARC versus how DTS manages our bit streams over ARC and eARC. So for those who may not be aware, ARC stands for Audio Return Channel, eARC stands for Enhanced Audio Return Channel. An Enhanced Audio Return Channel can handle higher bandwidth audio, which means we could get over eARC a full DTSX uncompressed, master audio bit stream across that eARC channel. Dolby will actually compress an Atmos bit stream to fit over a standard audio return channel. We don't do that. So if you have an ARC connection between your television and your AVR, the best you're going to get from DTS is a DTS digital surround audio bit stream. That is 5.1. Now we do some magic in the background sometimes that can give you a little bit more than 5.1 when you turn on Neural X, but for all intents and purposes, it is a 5.1 compressed bit stream that we pass over ARC. Dolby, on the other hand, can either do Dolby Digital, or they could even send a higher compressed, or more compressed audio bit stream or Atmos bit stream over ARC. So for us, we say eARC is the way to go, because then you can get full bandwidth, DTSX, DTS HD Master Audio, DTS Digital Surround, whatever you want to send over that channel, you can do. And that's just a matter of ensuring that your television has eARC, which most do now, if not all, and then ensuring that your AVR or your processor or even your soundbar also has eARC. Yep.
All right.
I have one question left. The BRAVIA XR streaming service, will that be worldwide or first US only?
For core?
That's a good question that we don't have a good answer for yet, and that's only because if you go out and you read all the press releases that Sony has released about BRAVIA Core, it's a little abstract, it's a little obscure at the time. I interpret that as somewhat of a TBD, but that's just my own interpretation. What they say is it will be available, BRAVIA Core, on 2021 BRAVIA XR televisions. They don't necessarily specify how that will differ from region to region. So I think that those questions will be answered very shortly.
Yeah, it could be this distribution. The service could be available, but it may be different movies are authorized for distribution in different countries. So you may get it, but you may get a different combination of movies as your option, because the TV has the capability. So no more questions. You guys are shocking. We had a very good turnout. I love, like I said, having you guys come. It's always fun, even though it's in the morning. I think about, oh man, I got to get up in the morning and do another webinar. But every time I sit down, I get excited, and I love just hanging out and talking to you guys. It's time for me to start my day. It's time for Frederick to finish his wine and go to bed. And what time is it there, Johan? You're ahead of us as well, right?
Almost 7 p.m. now, so time for a weekend.
So 7 p.m. for Johan. Frederick, it is what time for you?
It's nearly 2 a.m. Saturday morning.
Wow. Okay.
I'm a night owl, so I'm okay with that.
Okay.
All right. And for the rest of us on the East Coast, we're just getting started. So thank you everybody for coming, and we shall talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Thank
Have a
everyone.
great weekend.
Take care.
Bye.